Point. I'm Joel Sipper, your host, and joining me is Spectrum editor Colton Poole. Well, Colton, first topic of the day, Bison football. What were your first impressions of that last game against Indiana State?
Well, NDSU performed as always. You know, we talked a little bit about it before the show. I think NDSU, it's almost boring how well they're performing. I mean, games are not that exciting. They're dominating in so many different ways.
They just drive it down the field, and there's nothing you can do.
Right, exactly. And like I say, they're doing it through the air, through.
And now that they got this guy back, how dangerous are they with Zach Raw?
With Zach Raw, it just adds another dimension to that offense. You've got John Crockett, Chase Morlock, King Frazier, that three-headed running game. But then there's also Carson Wentz hitting Raw for 80-yard touchdowns. So I mean. It's ridiculous how well this offense is doing.
And then that was the only down point where NDSU didn't allow a touchdown the whole season in the fourth quarter, and then not one, but let's look at this too.
I mean, you can look at it from a couple different ways. Okay, sure, the defense gave up a touchdown. The offense gave up the other. And second of all, that was the second string defense. And I had Kyle Emanuel said that a little bit before the game or after the game, rather, that, we gave up some points in the fourth quarter, but
it sounded he had he seemed like he was a little ticked off about it. It's like, if I was out there, that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah,
Speaking
exactly.
He played like a monster that game, 2.5 sacks. I think he just got added to another national watch list or something.
Yeah, he's doing well as always. He and Zach Raw are going off right now.
I mean, Zach Raw, too, you look at his career here, it's unbelievable the way that he is playing. He is 5th in career receiving yards at NDSU. He's 4th in receiving touchdowns, 5th in career receptions. I mean, he's very close. He could potentially, if he has a couple monster games, honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if he was a leader in all those categories as we take a look.
Even before the season started, he was so high up those top NDSU all-time rankings in receiving because of that monster season last year when she had, I believe it was 16 touchdown catches and 1,600 receiving yards, somewhere around there. Huge year last year.
I don't get how he didn't get more recognition last year. I feel like he kind of flew under the radar.
Well, NDSU's focus has always been the running game. So last year it was Samujuri and John Crockett kind of being the driving force of their offense, and the driving force of the team is always the defense, being able to limit teams not only throughout an entire game, but especially in the fourth quarter, like we saw this year, only giving up a touchdown with the second stringers for the first time this season. That is.
It says a lot of that. And then speaking about the running backs, John Crockett, he's slowly making his way up in history as he went for 3. He's now in 7th all time. One team that could potentially, as we look at the standings here, who do you think could give North Dakota some trouble later?
I think UNI is going to pose some problems for NDSU. We saw that a little bit last year with Cole Morgan and David Johnson. Though that offense giving NDSU a little bit of fits last year. But NDSU always pulling off those huge fourth quarter come from behind wins. They're always about the fourth quarter and sometimes a little slow start, but. I think UNI is going to pose some problems. I think because of that multifaceted offensive game because you've got studs like Cole Morgan and David Johnson in the same team.
There's a couple of things that I take away from that game or just in general. With NDSU, in my 4 years that I've been here, I've learned never count out NDSU in the fourth quarter, just the way that against UNI, they seemed down and out, and they came roaring back. And even against Western Illinois this year, we thought, wow, this is how this streak's going to end.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. But I think, last year, I knew that once that fourth quarter happens and those guys put up those 4 numbers when the fourth quarter is starting to happen,
it's just something kicks in.
It's a different pace. It really is. And I don't know if that's the coaching or just the tradition or just the players' certain thinking of the game. Like, they get warmed up in the first quarter, it almost seems like. It really doesn't matter how well they do in the first half, because it's not how you start games, it's how you finish them. And NDSU has finished 30 over 30 games in a row well.
I think it's interesting, too, the way that you mentioned with the studs at UNI and then also at SDSU. One player that I'm really looking forward to seeing during those games is John Crockett. I think you can tell Crockett has a huge chip on his shoulder being snubbed by a guy like Zach Zenner and David Johnson, how they were selecting them over him in the preseason. I feel like he still has something to prove, and he's going to let those people know, hey, you guys missed me.
Yeah, because we were talking about it a little bit with Crockett during a player interview when he kind of mentioned how he does kind of look at those standings and look at how he compares to other running backs in the conference and in the country. I think he might have a little bit of chip on the shoulder to say.
He's such a competitor, too, watching him in warm-ups during game day. I mean, it's one thing where he's like, you see him around campus, you see him a little bit after practice during interviews, he's all laid back. It's just like just something in his mind that just locks in. I've heard him, he's like, his job is, let's get these boys ready for war out here.
He's kind of had to develop that, too. I think we saw that last year and the year before that, where he was kind of the goof around guy almost all the time. But he's definitely learned that in his senior season, when to turn it on and when to turn it off. And that has really helped his game too, being able to really focus in on the big moments and having those clutch plays like we saw against Iowa State when he juked that defender and put him on ice skates and went off for that 80-yard touchdown. That was a momentum changer in that game, and Crockett has been a momentum changer in pretty much every game this season.
He is a difference maker. So as NECU, their next game is at USD. USD hasn't scored a point on NDSU the last two games. Crockett, everyone else has had major success. What do you think is going to be the outcome of that game?
I think going into the season, I thought that USD, I still kind of think that USD is kind of the dark horse maybe, that they can make some noise in the Missouri Valley.
Even though they haven't won a game yet?
Yeah, I still think that because it's just they've got such a good overall team. But they are in the Missouri Valley, which is the toughest conference in the FCS, I believe. And I think that they've got a really good overall team. They went 2-5. They were 2-0. Or not 2-0 rather.
They started off strong.
They started off strong.
They had that game against Oregon, which
but that's Oregon, one of the greatest teams
I don't get
in
how
the
they
country.
get scheduled for that.
But. And they did better than I thought they would against Oregon. But I think the Coyotes might make some noise, but I think NDSU is too veteran, too focused, and do well on the road. And they're in the Dakota Dome, which does make some noise. Make some noise, but NDSU is certainly used to that in the Fargo Dome. So I don't think that's going to be a problem at all. I think NDSU is going to roll the Coyotes.
They were going to say, too, Coach Kleiman was talking about, like, this is probably going to be the second time we use a silent count all season. First one was Iowa State. So I think NDSU is going to roll them. What do you think the score is going to be?
I think I'm leaning like a 49-10.
49-10?
Yeah. I don't think it's out of the question that NDSU is going to run all over USD. I think the Bison, that's what they do. They run the ball.
I mean, USD 110th rushing defense. It's going to be a long day if they don't shore that up.
Right.
Me personally, I think it's going to be 38-10. Carson Wentz, he's been slinging the ball around hard, and defense for NDSU, I don't see them giving up many points unless it's where the second stringers are in for NDSU and South Dakota still has their first team in.
I think that they're going to be running the ball a lot early and often, but then I think that's what opens up those plays to Zach Vra. I think Vra has another couple touchdowns in this game. I don't think that's out of the question.
He had a touchdown last game against South Dakota last time they were there. So.
Right.
All right, well, that pretty much wraps it up for this segment of Bison football. Coming up next, we are going to talk NFL. Stick around.
It's a bird. It's a plane. No, it's the power of free checking with Kasasa. First Community Credit Union offers free ATMs, mobile banking, and are conveniently located right next to the campus of NDSU. We also offer Kasasa, which is a free checking account that pays you cash. Kasasa requires no minimum deposit to open, no monthly service fees, and don't forget the free ATMs. Discover the power of Kasasa at your local First Community Credit Union.
The NDSU Bookstore, where every true fan and alum goes to get their pride on. Gear up with a variety of high-quality t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, and more. Made by top-of-the-line brands like Under Armour, Nike, and CI Sport to help you show off your Bison pride. The NDSU Bookstore has everything you need in your two favorite colors, green and gold.
Well, welcome back to Game Point. Still with me, Spectrum editor, sports editor Colton Poole. What we're going to look at is the NFC North in the NFL. I know last week, what's going on with the Bears here?
Well, I didn't get a chance to watch this game, but I looked at some of the highlights. I looked at some of the stats, and that was a disappointing game for the Bears because, I mean, that offense didn't really perform as well as many thought they would coming into the season. And Jake Huller is really struggling in this game. He had a touchdown and an interception. And that really isn't going to cut it, really, to be honest, for the Bears team that relies so much on the offense.
Yeah.
And Brandon Marshall, we saw this, was really upset after the game.
Just going off.
And he's screaming at Robbie Gould. Speaking of, why was he screaming at the kicker? What could Robbie Gould possibly have said?
I mean, it's a debatable subject whether kickers are real people. Just kidding, but I mean, Detroit, the way that they're kicking has, they might have movements sort of starting, but I mean, you got to put it on Brandon Marshall too, man. If you don't want the kicker out there, score in the red zone.
Right.
Eliminate that. Turn those touchdowns into field goals. I mean, Robbie Gould, he's one of the most reliable kickers in the league, or he's been a while where I don't think like...
I think he deserves at least to say something.
He deserves some credit. I mean, if it was a kicker that hadn't been in the league a little bit, sure, he can get on his case, but Robbie Gould, he's been with that team a long time.
Third most accurate kicker in the NFL. Brandon Marshall, I think what's going on is that, because I always had faith in Jay Cutler, but I'm losing that faith right now. Jay Cutler is a guy that, like, he seems so calm, but then at the same time, he looks like he doesn't care at all.
Yeah.
He just always has that demeanor, which, I mean, in the NFL, you do what you can to make it. But Brandon Marshall, I think, is trying to push him into a little bit of a leadership role. And
Get that fire?
That fire. They need that right now. They need a little bit of motivation, maybe, because 3-4 right now, I think, is not as well as they thought they would when they picked up Jared Allen and Lamar Houston and drafted Kyle Fuller in the offseason. That defense would do better. Yeah. But that offense isn't doing nearly as well either. When you've got guys like Matt Forte doing as well as he is, Brandon Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey, Martellus Bennett, they picked up Santonio Holmes. Why are they not doing as well as many people thought? I think that's because of Jay Cutler.
I think it's sort of interesting, too, the last Chicago team to win in Soldier Field, Chicago Blackhawks in the Stadium Series, so that's a little rough. But
that is very rough.
I think there needs to be an emergence of a true leader. They don't have Urlacher anymore. I mean, granted, there's a guy like Briggs in the locker room where I could see him stepping up into that role, but dropping 3 games, and then you have, I think it was Kyle Long saying that the fans weren't loud enough, and then sure enough, he complains about the boos.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't really seem like anything is like really under control. With Lovie Smith there, like things were under at least control even when they were losing and things weren't going well. But they also had Brian Urlacher, which helped. But like you said, Lance Briggs can be that leader, but I think he's more of a defensive leader. Brian Urlacher was an overall team leader. Jay Cutler, Matt Forte doesn't have that demeanor to be that kind of guy. Jay Cutler does not have that demeanor.
And
Brandon Marshall is trying to be,
He's
but
trying
he's too volatile in his personality.
I think, too, where in the NFL, it's not really like, don't get me wrong, it's good to have a good wide receiver, but I don't think, it doesn't seem like that type of position where it warrants leadership. There's guys and veterans that the way that they do things, but they look out with the talent people, with the wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs, they lead them, just not overall, where the wide receiver has such a bad name where if you shout and you're flamboyant and stuff like that, you get the diva label.
Even the most veteran guys like Wes Welker, I mean, okay, there's the whole thing off the field this year, but even before that, like, he wasn't, like, he's fine, but he's not really a leader. You can't really be that leader, like you said, from that position. It's got to be the quarterback because he's involved with everyone, and he has to build chemistry with everyone, including the offensive line, making calls at the line of scrimmage, the running backs, passing, pass protecting, handing off, wide receivers, tight ends. He has to have chemistry with pretty much everyone on the team and almost be a second coach like Peyton Manning.
Yeah, and here's the thing, though, too. With that whole Chicago fallout that happened after the one game, I'll give them this. It was to Miami, and I think a lot of people aren't giving Miami the credit that they deserve.
I agree.
They knocked off New England the week before. They almost beat Green Bay. They had Green Bay on the ropes, where Aaron Rodgers really didn't have the greatest day until he had that drive.
In the last second hit, Andrew Corliss. But yeah, I think Chicago, I had such high expectations and they're not meeting them. I almost wonder if that's because they need a better head coach.
Mark Trestman?
Mark Trestman is an offensive guru. He would be a fantastic offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
But I don't think, at least right now, what we're seeing, he's not the greatest head coach.
Well, I mean, if we could take a look at the standings here, it's not everything sort of jumbled around. I mean, you have Detroit at the top, 5-2. Green Bay's tied with them, 5-2. Detroit has that tiebreaker because they beat Green Bay earlier this year. Chicago, don't count them all yet, 3-4, and then you have Minnesota, where
They still have the potential to make a comeback, but I don't see that. Yeah, I don't think Minnesota going. Maybe they do start things against Tampa Bay this week.
I mean, it's Tampa Bay, so nice little step up. Maybe get the ball rolling, get something going offensively because you have a lot of mix of young, talented guys.
There's still so much chaos going on with the Adrian Peterson thing. I think that entire team with a rookie quarterback, Teddy Bridgewater, I think can make it in the league as a starter. But I think there's too much going on for this team to really have a successful year this year.
Not a stable environment for him to learn around. Little NDSU tie. How about Jared McKinnon, the former Georgia Southern running back? A couple times that he made the trip to the Dome.
A little bit of a stretch for the NDSU connection, but McKinnon is really doing well, and combined with Matt Asiata, that running game is doing better than I think many people thought it would without Adrian Peterson, which kind of speaks to the offensive running, I guess, concepts of Zimmer. There, I think he is a good offensive coach.
The one thing with Minnesota that I look at, though, Matt Asiata, he's done decent stepping into that role, but I think he's got more of a fullback type to him where I'd rather see, if I was a Vikings fan, I'd rather see McKinnon start, and then you have Asiata mixed in for like third downs and other situations.
I think those two are very good complementary backs. So it really kind of depends on what you really want to do. If you want Asiata in short yardage, kind of ground and pound situations, but you've got McKinnon as like a kind of a slash back. I think they really complement each other and kind of replace that production that Adrian Peterson is.
So it's almost halfway through the season. It's amazing how much this has flown by.
Yeah.
For the NFC North, do you think the standings are going to stay the same, or where do you see some movement?
I think Chicago finds its way to be in the second place of the NFC North. I think Detroit drops off like they always do.
Yeah.
And I think Green Bay pulls away with it because of Mr. Badman himself, Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
I thought that with James Jones leaving,
There's not a big receiver to throw to on the outside.
Right. There's not a big time. There's big time, but like not a big physical guy.
Yeah.
I thought that Aaron Rodgers would drop off a little bit.
But it's the chemistry and then all the other stuff that he has with him, I guess.
He makes guys look good, and I think that's proving that he is really the best, one of the best quarterbacks.
Well, that will be something to look at as the season goes on. We're going to take a break here. Stick around as we have Bison basketball preview.
The NDSU Bookstore, where every true fan and alum goes to get their pride on. Gear up with a variety of high-quality t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, and more. Made by top-of-the-line brands like Under Armour, Nike, and CI Sport to help you show off your Bison pride. The NDSU Bookstore has everything you need in your two favorite colors, green and gold.
It's a bird. It's a plane. No, it's the power of free checking with Kasasa. First Community Credit Union offers free ATMs, mobile banking, and are conveniently located right next to the campus of NDSU. We also offer Kasasa, which is a free checking account that pays you cash. Kasasa requires no minimum deposit to open, no monthly service fees, and don't forget the free ATMs. Discover the power of Kasasa at your local First Community Credit Union.
Well, welcome back. Believe it or not, but basketball is right around the corner as November approaches. And with that, Bison basketball back in action.
Mm-hmm. It's an exciting time, I think, coming off, for NDSU men's basketball, coming off the huge upset against Oklahoma in the NCAA tournament. That was an exciting win. Exciting time for NDSU basketball. I think it's kind of it's certainly a new era, though.
Yeah.
I think you've got Dave Richmond, who I think is really a solid coach. He's going to do well, but I think this roster is going to be a little bit of a stretch because of the personnel there. Mm-hmm. That they're going to have to make a lot of adjustments. You lose Taylor Braun, Marshall Bjorklund, Trayvon Wright. Those guys were huge for this team. I think they lost about 60 points of their 75 points a game.
Yeah,
that's kind of a big deal.
It's a little bit of a big deal,
right? But they've guys coming back like Lawrence Alexander, who had 28 points against Oklahoma and the game tying 3 to push the game into overtime. Mm-hmm. That guy is going to have a great year, and combined with Carlin Dupree, a sophomore, an up-and-coming sophomore in the Summit League. And then you've also got guys like Chris Kading, who is going to be a solid post player, I think, in the league. But NDSU was picked 5th to finish in the Summit League. I think with all those guys gone, that's not an off assessment, but I don't think that's a very fair assessment. Because
I feel like
they're the returning champions. They've got those guys coming back, and Corey Brown too. those guys are gonna succeed.
I
Certainly.
mean, take a look at the standings where, I can get IPFW at the top of the Summit League. And then Denver, I can see that. Oral Roberts, South Dakota State, it really doesn't intrigue me. I mean, South Dakota State, sure enough, they play. When it comes conference tournament time, it's pretty much a home game.
And they've got Cody Larson coming back. But I think the IPFW almost beating NDSU in the Summit League Championship last year definitely proves that they deserve to be ranked up there.
Yeah.
Certainly in the top 1 or 2. And I think with we're matching up NDSU against IPFW. We talked a little bit about this, is that NDSU is going to have to run a lot of small ball with Lawrence Alexander, Corey Brown. I mean, they're not small compared to who. Corey Brown is 6'4". But, okay, Corey Brown, Lawrence Alexander, A.J. Jacobson, who's kind of a guard forward kind of slash player.
It is really first year of real work, being part of the active roster.
Freshman, right? And so AJ, and then Chris Kading, and then Carlin Dupree as well. Brett Vandenberg is coming back. He'll be a solid defensive player, and he can shoot the three as well, which kind of causes NDSU to be that spread it out, shoot the three, kind of a hot and cold maybe team because of how they shoot.
I mean, it's a little bit different because last year was so well rounded. They had so many weapons.
Right.
Taylor Brown could give him the ball and he would do whatever you want. You guys like Mike Fell at the start of the season, he was pretty hot with the three. You can work it down low with Marshall Bjorklund, Trayvon Wright, just all around Swiss Army knife that could pretty much do it all.
I was going to say, if you want to talk about versatility, Wright was really the epitome of that versatility because he could make a three like no other. He could slam it home on anyone in the Summit League or anyone in college basketball. But I think with those guys gone, it's going to be really tough. And against IPFW, because their big guy is going to be Chris Kading, 6'6".
6'6".
295, 6'9".
Steve Forbes.
Steve Forbes from IPFW.
Big
that's
Coke machine with legs.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough matchup for NDSU and for any team in the Summit League. Getting him the ball is going to be really key for the Mastodons.
Speaking of tough schedule, NDSU, holy cow, their first 3 games are in the 2K Wounded Warrior Classic. They play year when they lost the Summit League title against South Dakota State, they played Indiana. They played like a number 1 team like that. But now this year they're playing a number 10 ranked Texas team that has one of the top recruits in the nation. I mean, that's going to be interesting. A little thrown in the fire for Richmond. And then after that, they play a Big Ten school like Iowa.
And I really hope that NDSU, I don't expect the Bison to beat any of these teams. I really hope that they compete in these games, though, and get something out of it, because even against that win against Notre Dame, I mean, Carlin Dupree stepped it up in that game and really got his season going, and guys like Marshall Bjorklund and Taylor Braun really got their offensive games going, and really had each one of those starters had solid games against Notre Dame, I think, but I really hope that this year they get some solid production in those games against Texas and against Iowa. Those will be tough contests, and those will be tough tests, and hopefully they'll be able to improve from those games before they start their Summit League schedule.
Also, just right around the corner is women's basketball. Coming in with the new head coach, I mean, there were a few positives last year. I think what some people don't realize is with how many games that they dropped, they're in a lot of those games.
They were in a lot of those games. I think there was one game where they had like a 12, 13-point lead in the
against
BSA.
Northern Iowa. I remember that game specifically.
Yeah, and they let that lead go. That was almost a heartbreaker to see UNI cash 4 threes in the last 2 minutes.
They can't.
They were on fire in that game, but I think NDSU performed well in that game. But they've got to put the pieces together, and we'll see if they're able to do that with Walseth there.
They only graduated 1 senior. This is something I could not see that happening. Like Walseth, she hasn't coached before, but she's gonna get on those players.
Right, she certainly has high expectations for the program, and I think that she's got maybe a couple of the pieces there with Marina Whittle and Brooke Lamar. By the way, the offense is going to start begin
what
and
she's
end
been
with
saying.
Lamar.
Yeah, what Coach Walseth has been saying. It's going to be fun to go to those games because she says she wants to run this high-paced, high-scoring offense and just sort of being around the team.
And with this roster, kind of like what we talked about with the men's side, they're gonna, if they want to do well and if they want to exceed their bottom-ranked Summit League prediction, they're gonna have a little bit of that run and gun.
They're not the biggest team in
offensive
the
scheme.
Summit League.
Right. And so, I mean, granted, you do have a little bit of down low, I guess, power with Marina Whittle because she can be a threat in the post. But I mean, you've got players like Lamar, who is not tall by anyone's standards, but she can drive, and if she can produce a little bit of a jump shot, that will certainly help. But she has to limit the turnovers too. She has a little bit of that.
She has such good ball handling skills. There's some times where she's a little fancy with it and turns it over, but at the same time, she does seem like a baller with the way that she moves the ball.
Yeah, right. And she gets a little bit of a little risky with that, which kind of hurts and helps the team at times when she goes off for 30 points and has 5 turnovers or whatever it is. I think if Walseth is able to coach that out of Lamar a little bit, not necessarily the riskiness or the like the riskiness, if she can coach that out of her, the turnovers, that would be great for the Bison.
I think, this year might be a little bit rough, or it's going to be some times, but I'm high on Maureen Walseth as a head coach. I think she's going to take the Bison places.
Those high standards will certainly help.
Well, that pretty much wraps it up for us here at Game Point. I'm Joel Sipper. This is Colton Poole. Stick with us in a couple weeks. It's a whole new ball game.